Welcome back. I'm still with Dr. Vuyokazi Mahlati. She's the chairperson of the Land Reform Review Panel. She's in our Pretoria studios and in Johannesburg with the national coordinator of the Alliance for Rural Democracy, Mayor Constance Mogale. Let me pick up with you where we left off, Dr. Mahlati. The main recommendations from your report, and I think the key question is, to what extent do you address the question of expropriation without compensation in order for such land to be nationalized? Please tell me.
Thank you so much, and hello, Mayor Constance.
Yeah.
I think the big issue, as I explained earlier on expropriation without compensation, is that our role was to look at the conditions and also recognizing that our process is distinct from the parliamentary process. The parliamentary process is basically continuing in terms of its committee and taking the process further. So ours was to look into the conditions, and we came to the conclusion, after an analysis of arguments pro and against expropriation without compensation, EWC, we came to the conclusion that the Constitution as it stands is compensation-centric, meaning it is compensation-based. It does recognize and talks to the issue of just and equitable compensation, which basically moves beyond the market value. However, the language of the Constitution emphasizes compensation. And when we looked at the issues of land demand in our country and the issues of historical justice, because those are also very critical, we came to the conclusion that the current scenario has to be enabled from a constitutional and legislative perspective with an amendment of the Constitution as far as Section 25 is concerned. That talks to enabling expropriation without compensation. And we went further to provide assistance in terms of which areas this can be applied in, and particularly also the kind of language that can assist in rephrasing for ensuring that we are not going to be stuck, arguing about what this means, but be very clear and articulate very specifically the issue and conditions of expropriation without compensation.
Did you express an opinion on the nationalization of land?
It was not part of our terms of reference.
But do you have a view, or from your recommendations, are you saying anything about this?
No, we didn't dwell on the issue of nationalization, but we specifically were responding to the terms of reference as stipulated.
Okay, well, let's just go through then the salient recommendations so I can bring Mayor Constance Mogale into the conversation. And again, for the benefit of our viewers, so we all get a sense of ultimately what the Land Review Panel is recommending, what you're saying should happen. What are the key recommendations?
You want me to go further?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention them, list the key recommendations.
Yes. So
yes.
Basically, I spoke to the issue of restitution, which also is something that Lamusa raised, which is in terms of ensuring that, first and foremost, we address the restitution cases with the deadline of December 1998, that we support. And we also support the strengthening of the Land Claims Commission as well as the court, and we go further to push for issues of a recognition of rights from a tenure perspective to ensure that we address the current serious crisis where we have close to 2/3 of the rights in South Africa not being recognized, registered. And we feel that an immediate process has to start from both the rural areas as well as urban areas that are affected to make sure that the over 60% of our population that is with rights that are not registered and recognized are immediately being recorded.
Do we know how much land is available out there, that especially the land that's owned by the state, that has got to be made available for some of the elements that you mentioned, for instance, for purposes of restitution, for housing, for agriculture, and other developments?
We actually have recommended, because we found that the issue of audits is part of the issue of contestation. So our immediate push is to make sure that we finalize that, because some of the audits focused on land owned by individuals and didn't manage to get into the specifics on trust land and corporates. We also, within government is currently, as we speak, busy with that audit, going beyond the department, including the SOEs, and looking at different spheres of government. But what I can say is that it doesn't matter how much of the state land we can redistribute. It will not be enough. We have to find land from also the private sector.
All right, let me bring in Mayor Constance Mogale into the conversation here, and thanks again for joining us. I want to look at the situation regarding rural land. From your experience as the Alliance for Rural Democracy, what is the situation there? I know that one of the new controversial issues, it's not new, but it has just made the news again recently, is that of Ingonyama Trust, where the Zulu King Zwelithini says he's not going to make that land available to this process of land reform anyway, that he would like the trust to continue operating the way it has been operating over years.
So it is unfortunate for the position of King Goodwill Zwelithini, because he leaves us with no alternative, because we are of the view that the state should transfer land to the communal land residents, and the state should redistribute land. So, and we are not in favor of the state owning land on behalf of the people in the communal land and in the tribal areas. And traditional leadership now comes into fore. Now, in the way that Ingonyama Trust Board is structured, where King Zwelithini is the sole beneficiary of all land in KwaZulu-Natal, and it goes further to give him more power to turn residents of KwaZulu-Natal into labor tenants or tenants in their own land of birth. It gives us concern about this institution of traditional leaders, and it gives us no role modeling, because if we were to recommend them, then maybe we should look at this Ingonyama Trust Board for best practices in the way they are governing the land, in the way they are redistributing the land, and in the way they are giving respect and recognition to the interim.
How would you like that matter to be resolved then, of the Ingonyama Trust? Because the king, together with the board of the trust, they say that they're not going to hand back that land anyway, and if anything, they'll take this whole recommendation to the courts if they have to. What would you like to see happen?
So we have already instructed our litigation partners to take the matter to court. We have not been in favor of land registered into trusts because of the way the legislation is being structured and the difficulty of reshaping these trusts. So the trustee becomes the sole beneficiary, and then the son inherits and it goes into the family. And in the case where public land is held in trust on behalf of the community, it becomes difficult for rights owners or rights holders to also be in a succession plan.
Yep.
And we are recommending this trust to be abolished, to be
done away with completely.
Done away completely, because we would say let's restructure it differently, so that rights holders have a say. The right to free and prior informed consent is respected. Recognition of the Interim Protection of Informal Land Rights Act is enforced. But because the king himself, who is the trustee, is already contesting and showing muscle and threatening, then it must just be.
It must just fall. Dr. Mahlati, how do you think this matter of the Ingonyama Trust should be resolved?
You know, the issue of Ingonyama Trust, we need to put it into perspective within the whole land reform process. Because I think sometimes, you know, the approach, I'm talking in terms of media, does not actually appreciate the issues. Because when we're talking to the Ingonyama Trust, this is basically not related to the issues of expropriation without compensation. I have to say that for one. The focus relates to the contestation, as indicated, around issues of governance and ensuring the issues of the rights holders. And I believe that the approach that we are proposing of a review allows for space for people to, you know, because it requires a proper process in managing it, because it's an issue that has been sitting with us. And right now, as we speak, there are also land claims on the very same land. We're sitting right now with the case of Melmoth. So there are so many issues that are part and parcel of this that require a proper space.
Sure, okay, I understand.
Because this in a proper review.
And it's a vexed issue. I can understand that it would require further engagement. But from the side of the Alliance for Rural Democracy, just a brief comment from you. How quickly would you like these recommendations to be implemented? Because we've been having discussions, it's 25 years now. You know, land has always been at the center of public discourse and policy formulation and politics in South Africa. Briefly, how quickly do you think the recommendations should be implemented?
So the recommendations must go back to the masses, because I don't think this process was ever had ever went to the masses, where the people who are going to be affected should have a say. One. Yeah. Two, we agree with most of the recommendation. The reform processes must not involve land or for land reform only. Yeah. It must involve land for South Africans.
Sure. And a quick comment from also, you, Dr. Mahlati. I'm afraid we're pressed for time. I just want your view. I mean, how quickly can the recommendations be implemented? Because we've been talking.
Well, so we are very happy with the response generally. And our view is just to make sure that we engage and get the process going.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Vuyokazi Mahlati, for having been our guest, and Mayor Constance Mogale, we appreciate your time on the show. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, all right, and that's all we had for you. Thank you for joining the Modise Network, and we invite you to be with us again next week. That's all we have for you. Goodbye.